Hey everyone, I kind of hinted that I was going to be making this video, just wasn't really sure when or how, and well, today has kind of thrown that into kind of I had an idea of what I was going to do and talk about, but then today's patch kind of changed that. So, I'm recording this on the day that Season 17 launches, which is after the initial season of Stadium. If you would like to see... You can actually see, not in this current one, but in the initial season, I was able to make Pro as both a tank and a support, and I was able to reach Elite as DPS. As you can see, the ones I mainly played were Reinhardt, Moira, and Ashe. And when I say I mainly played Ashe, I want to stress, and I'll talk about this when we get to Ashe in the practice range, I was basically just letting the Dynamite and Bob do all the work. But I'll explain that when we get there. I was also able to accomplish the achievement that they put out of getting a specific title if you were able to win with every character in the initial season of Stadium. This one right here, MVP. The achievement, the challenge was win a game, one game, with every one of the characters that were part of the initial launch of Stadium. I was able to pull that off, and I've got the MVP title. I've also got the Seasonal Stadium Pro Tank and Pro Support titles as well. And this name card, along with this title here. So that's the name card there, which I'm particularly proud of. You know, I've also got, the one for Stadium Pro Support. So yeah, I'm pretty proud of being able to accomplish those. I wasn't able to reach All-Star or Legend. I'd like to reach All-Star maybe this season, but we'll have to see how that goes based on the changes they're making, because at times it becomes very frustrating to try and figure out what you should be playing in terms of which characters and which builds, because they keep making changes, especially to the ones that emerge as good ones. And that's part of the frustration of trying to get all their players to also participate in this. They're trying to encourage people to play Stadium, and yet they constantly are nerfing the good builds. The builds that we tell people, hey, play this build, it's really good. And then they nerf it. And then they don't really buff other ones. It's like, and I see this constant phrase in the patch notes, especially the gigantic amount of patch notes that came out today, which is, we want to encourage more build variety. It's such a PR statement I've seen where the developers seem to hate the idea of people playing only the exact same build every game. The meta builds, the builds that are considered meta for the characters. They want variety. They want people to play different things every time. Variety is what it's all about. And that's just not how players are. It feels like there's this massive difference in perspective on how this is when it comes to, like, the developers and the players. Players don't want to do variety. At least, they kind of at first, because they're trying stuff out. But eventually, they want to figure out what is the good stuff and then play those so they can be able to do the most to not only help their own chances of winning, but to also help their team. Because otherwise, if they don't play what is considered the meta build, their teammates are going to feel like they are griefing them or trolling them. That's just how these gaming communities are. So it becomes very frustrating. And just a reminder, this is the breakdown of how Stadium actually works when it comes to their ranks. You know, rookie, novice, contender, elite. Like, basically, you can see this as bronze, silver, gold, platinum, diamond, and and so on and so forth. So, by the way, you can still have a chance to get the Juno All-Star skin because they extended it for this season because they felt that people didn't have enough time once they made some changes after the initial launch, and how they felt like it wasn't a good enough amount of time and such for people to get it. So they're making it where you can get this season as well, along with a new Mercy skin. I know some people, they're going to be grinding Stadium just for that Mercy skin because, well, Mercy sells. Trust me, that is absolutely the case. So one of the things I do like is that they have a separate practice range here just for Stadium, and that's where I'm going to be talking about some of this. So this is on the launch of Season 17, which means 3 additions to the roster have been made. As you can see, the roster per Steam is not that big compared to the rest of the main game. But they did make additions, and they're going to continue making additions every season. So for this new season, they added Sigma, Junkrat, and Zenyatta. And I'll probably talk about them last. I was able to win a game with each character, but I'll be honest, some of them I don't even remember what those builds actually were. Like, I think D.Va was the last one I was able to win with, but that's only because I discovered a build I thought could be pretty effective, and I actually, if you have seen on my channel, I posted a highlight vid of this massive 5-man self-destruct nuke ult that I got with D.Va. It's the best self-destruct I've ever had in the years I've played this game. And unfortunately, it didn't give me the achievement. So I still don't have the Game Over achievement for D.Va, because apparently you can't get those achievements in Stadium. It doesn't count. Apparently. Also, it looks like they've actually disabled one of the powers for D.Va. So for those of you who don't know how Stadium works, this is basically how it works. There's no swapping. This is not a mode where you can swap your characters. You pick a character, and you are basically given tools to make it work, to enhance how your character plays, in order to deal with various different compositions and situations. Now, it's not always going to work out, but for those of you who love playing specific characters, I think this is the mode that you're going to enjoy, because you're not going to be told, hey, swap to somebody you don't normally play because they're considered better. So, like, for me, I'm able to play Reinhardt without anybody telling me to swap Reinhardt. I just have to try and find other things that can make my character better to deal with the situation. And I enjoy that. I enjoy being able to try and come up with different builds and figure out different things that can be able to help out based on the situation. So with D.Va, one of the things that I was able to figure out was sometimes there can be a really good synergy with certain powers, and then with items. The items are basically this, which as you play and you do damage and do healing, you gain cash, which you can then use to buy items to enhance your character and go into the builds that you're trying for. So for example, what led to that highlight was a couple of things. It was this power, Express Detonation, where it explodes 15% faster, but then there was also let's see, not this one. This one, except they've nerfed it today. So this one was, if it detonates while it's in midair, which combined with the power where it detonates faster, the self-destruct explosion damage and range will be increased by, it's now 100%. Before today, it was 200%. So think about that. When it explodes in midair, which if you have the power where it explodes faster, you're almost guaranteed to have it explode in midair, which means the damage and radius was 200% more. That's how I got that highlight, because it was an insane amount of damage. So you can see how there's some cool combinations you can come up with to really make this work. And you could still theoretically pull this off, it's just not as strong because Blizzard just feels like, okay, people are picking certain things all the time. We gotta nerf those and encourage them to pick other things without actually buffing other things. I'm not kidding. That's actually one of the things I noticed in one of the patch notes. They were talking about how they wanted to encourage more build variety with a character, and what I then saw was nerfs, and then no buffs to anything else. So it was a very confusing, wait a minute, you're encouraging us to do more build variety, but you're nerfing the good stuff and not buffing any of the bad stuff. You're not really helping the case here or helping encourage players to try other things, because now you're just telling them, don't play this character at all, ever. Because then who's going to want to play that character if they just nerf everything good about it, and then don't buff anything else? Anyways, basically the build I was thinking of when it came to D.Va, I think the one time I've actually played her and won a game with, it took a few attempts to win a game with her, but I was trying to basically come up with something that had to do with self-destruct as well as missiles, being able to also say, there's another one here. I think it's this one here, yeah. So while the fusion cannons can also be fired while you're using defense matrix. So being able to just constantly fire all the time while also using your defense matrix and your missiles can actually be pretty awesome. As you can see, there's a lot of generic items here, such as buffing your weapon power, your ability power, being able to increase your survivability. And these are all generic ones that basically every character can select. And then there's ones that are unique to the character you have, such as, I mentioned the one about the self-destruct. So this one leaves lava when you use self-destruct. This one is able to, every 200 damage that you mitigate, will reduce the cooldown of your micro missiles. You can be able to up the quantity and duration of the missiles. You can have it deal increased damage and do more knockback. And if you're wanting to make it where these can do more damage, you just also get things that up your ability power. And then you're able to pick some, you can also pick some powers. It's a best of 7, so you get to choose a power in the first round, the third round, the fifth round, and then the 7th final round if you are able to get there. So sometimes what you can afford, early on, such as like usually you're only going to afford these green ones, and then depending on how you do in the first round, then you can start to either get a couple rares or one epic that you really want. It's really going to depend on how you're feeling about the matchup and how the game is going. You can be able to also, this is a new feature that they added, such as being able to actually save and import builds. You can see here, you can actually create a build and save it. You can save up to 10 builds. You can import a build that somebody has made and bring that in and use that. You can share a build that you come up with. And they can also come up with example builds here for people to try out in case they don't know what to actually pick here. Apparently there was one here that they had for this, but they have actually disabled it. They'll actually disable powers if they feel like it's not working properly or if it's too overpowered or buggy, whatever the case may be. But usually the example builds will be either about survivability, your weapon power, or your ability power. And depending on the character, well, usually you're going to kind of gravitate towards certain things. But I'll talk more about that on other characters I've actually played more often, such as Reinhardt. So just to kind of give you an idea, let's go ahead and pick a couple of these. I also like this, the idea that when you use self-destruct, your allies will also gain some overhealth, so you're also giving, extra survivability to your teammates, which is something I always really like. Let's also go with this one as well. So then, of course, you'll notice the health. I think they've actually upgraded this in the practice range, where now they try to give you an idea of when you pick your stuff, it's going to show you the proper scaling, because as the game goes on, you're going to have both your health and your damage scale. Like, everything is just going to keep scaling up higher and higher, and I'll try to demonstrate this with characters like, and I'm not just talking about their health bar, I'm also talking about things like their barriers and such, and I'll show this with Reinhardt and Sigma. But you can be able to, see, like for certain characters, once you get to later rounds, they can just do an insane amount of damage, but also be able to have an insane amount of survivability.
Who invited the rookie?
You can see the lava that she's leaving behind.
Nerf this.
You see what I mean about the extra damage and radius?
Gotcha.
Now, trust me, if I had done that yesterday, it probably would have gotten every bot on this practice range, because, again, it was 200%. 100%, that's still good, but it's, well, yeah.
Nerf this.
Not quite what it used to be,
Game on.
So yeah, even though it's probably not a good recommended build, especially if you're wanting to climb to higher ranks, it's still a build that I think I can find some kind of fun and enjoyment if I actually wanted to play Diva in this mode. She's not exactly one of my go-tos. Now, Junker Queen. Oh my goodness, there was a build that I had a lot of fun with, and they have nerfed it. Of course they have. There was a build that I found that basically allowed you to just spam commanding shout. And it was so strong, guys, I'm telling you. Basically, the idea here was, let's go win. This used to have it be, eliminations would reset the cooldown of commanding shout. They have changed it where now it just reduces the cooldown by 50%. So they nerfed it. I'm telling you, you shouted and then got a kill. Once the duration was over, you could shout again immediately afterwards. And it just, the fact that he nerfed it, it's just, it really, and I'm just like, how can you do that? My goodness. But the also, one of the other ones here was that when you do commanding shout, you apply wounds to enemies within 10 meters, which can get bigger, and I'll show that with some of the items you can get. Chop to have that additional charge of carnage, and I used to also like getting Merciless Magnetism, which has your jagged blade home on a target within 15 meters, but I also like Adrenaline Rush, where it's also healing your allies for 50% of the damage that it heals you. Because then you can also have more synergy with things such as Booming Voice. The radius of commanding shout is increased by 50%, and your allies will be affected even if they are out of sight. And then you combine that with, say, this. Commanding shout's overhealth is increased by 30%, and allies are affected by commanding shout are healed for 5% of your health every second. So now you combine that with some of these other things here, and it's just like, holy mackerel, you've made the radius bigger, and you've made it where you combine it with Thrill of Battle. It's just, yeah. Now imagine what that was like when you were able to spam it over and over. You're constantly applying wounds to enemies, and you're constantly applying healing to your allies. It was so good. And I feel like it's not going to be nearly as good as it used to be, which makes me sad. By the way, the more ability power you got, the bigger your overhealth shield would be from commanding shout. This was something that you start to realize, and this is something that I definitely encourage people to do. You see there on the bottom right, hide ability details with the left alt button, and then show. This lets you know what ability power affects. It affects your Jagged Blade, your commanding shout, your carnage, and your rampage. This is something that I feel like some people don't quite know, is that it's actually going to let you know what, and you can also click on this if you want to actually see what some of the stats specifically do and affect, though it does say check your hero information screen to learn more about your abilities and what affects them. But this is where you can see things like life, weapon power, ability power, attack speed, cooldown reduction, your maximum ammo, weapon lifesteal, ability lifesteal, movement speed, reload speed, melee damage, critical damage. So here on your hero screen is where you can then see, okay, ability power affects this, whereas my weapon power affects just the scattergun. So I feel like that's something that people need to have enabled so they can see, okay, if I go ahead and grab this, it's going to buff this. And they have really tried to, again, like, they seem to be on a vendetta to nerf everything that people are picking that is considered good. They see everyone's picking Champions Kit, so they reduce the ability power it gives you, and they increase how much it costs. Because it used to be 40 ability power, and it only used to cost like 13,500. They just seem to just be on this vendetta to nerf anything that people are overusing all the time. We don't want you to use the same thing. Use different things, even stuff that's not good. I just don't get what their agenda is right now. It just seems so weird, so strange. But you can be able to just like really like constantly buff this up and really get this high, where you can even get like above 100%. So now with 105% ability power, look at what the shout does.
Stop mucking around and move.
So yeah, obviously, by the time you get to round 7, you have like 800 health. But then you commanding shout, all of a sudden you have almost 1,300 health. And again, that's also affecting the damage that it's doing because you're applying wounds whenever you shout. And also, it buffs the damage of Carnage. You can see it's one-shotting the bots.
Time for a thunderstorm. You're scattered, mate.
So unfortunately, it's not what it used to be, but I'm telling you, the commanding shout build, I remember one game specifically I had where in a round 7 I just dominated because I had everything and I was just running over the enemy team, just shouting over and over. Everybody shouting now was basically going in my head as we were playing that game because I was just able to spam shout the whole time. It was amazing. And unfortunately it looks like it's not what it used to be. Now Orisa. So if you're going for really like tanky stuff, you can definitely go for a Fortify build, which can just make you super tanky because there are 4 powers here that can really buff your Fortify. You also can get a Deflect, just like a Genji, so this has been an annoyance as a Reinhardt when an Orisa gets this, because then they just deflect my Fire Strike back, which can be very, very annoying. The barrier is back if you pick this, where you overheat and deploys a barrier. And the bongo drum is back. The supercharger, we jokingly call it the bongo drum because that's what it looks like. But when you pop Terra Surge, you'll actually drop a supercharger that increases the damage. I don't think a lot of people actually bothered taking this anymore. They probably did early on because they wanted to try it out, because everyone was just trying to try stuff out. But I think in terms of top builds, if you're wanting to climb with Orisa, I don't think it's really encouraged anymore. I think when I won my game with her, it may have been with that, but usually you're probably going to want to be going for the Fortify, especially against some really damage-heavy comps, just because of how survivable and tanky it makes you, because it can really, really make you extremely tanky. So, like, you Fortify, and oh, I forgot about some of the items as well. So you can also get some other items that can really add to how strong your Fortify can be. Grants more over health based on your maximum health. When you deal damage with the Energy Javelin, you heal. There's another thing you can get where when you pop your Fortify, or not your Fortify, when you use your Javelin Spin, you actually launch a Javelin. It does less damage, but still, being able to... So you can also go with a full-on Javelin Spin build. There's, like I said, there's usually something here for various different situations. If you need to deal more damage to shields, there's, of course, this against barriers, more damage against armor. There's a way to mitigate against beams. Okay, hold on a second, because I know it's here, because I've seen people have to take it. So I've taken this against the likes of Cassidy's or Anna's when they... either hinder or sleep you, because then you're able to restore your health. And I'm looking to see, because usually this is also, like, some people also go ahead and take this against a Zarya, but I think there is also, I think certain characters have certain ways to mitigate damage against beams because of Zarya. Do more damage against those that are farther away. I don't think I've ever done a weapon build against, say, as a Orisa. Just because I'm like trying to find myself be extremely tanky. The Javelin Spin duration, that's also pretty good. The increased duration, make your Fortify last even longer. When you use the ability, you restore your armor every time you use an ability. You grant your allies unstoppable. And then, of course, you can pick some other generic ones that everybody can use, such as the Von Wilhelm, which 15% health, armor, and shields, and you gain damage reduction if you're below 30% health. All these stuff is usually really, really good stuff. So look at that, it lasts for like 6 seconds, I believe.
You did not see it. Supercharged and on fire.
Let's change up the bot to another Orisa. There we go.
Fire more. Double. I'm on fire.
So not quite as much damage to take out another Orisa, but that's probably because I didn't let it fully charge. But yeah, as you can see, at this point, Orisa, if you take those, would be over 1,000 health. Even a fully charged doesn't quite finish an opposing Orisa.
I am strong and brave.
But yeah, I think it was a Fortify build that I won my one game with Orisa. Alright, let's talk about Zarya. So I believe she actually got buffed today. I've seen people do some different things with Zarya in terms of builds. Like there's this Volskaya Vortex where after a barrier is cast, your secondary fire can then spawn a slowing vortex that deals damage, which can be cool. But I think what I was gravitating towards was the idea. I say gravitating without meaning without a pun intended there. But I think what I was going for was a straight up barrier build. Like this one just really buffs the barrier itself. This one, when it expires, it grants more overhealth. This one heals you and gives you movement speed. And this one I also want to try here as well, because this actually makes it where it knocks back enemies and deals damage. So like, look how big the bubble is. You see that? Now if I pop it with enemies nearby, you see that? It knocks them back and it does damage. Oh, and then of course there are the items, such as your energy never goes below 20, your primary fire range is increased, and of course, if you're going to buff up your barriers, you can be able to increase the range of the projected barrier. When it's destroyed or expires, you gain decaying overhealth, restores life equal to the damage mitigated by the barrier. There was an item here that increased the duration of the barriers. It looks like they got rid of it, because there was one here that increased the duration of the barriers by like 40%. I think they removed it. Yeah, I think it's gone. And after you use a barrier, you start regenerating shields immediately.
Barrier in place. Double challenge the champ. Expect to lose.
Just straight up knocked her off the edge.
Lead us to victory. Огонь по готовности.
So now, because of this item or this power I got where it does damage if they are within range of my barrier, pop your barrier and then grab, and then they can't get away while your barrier does extra damage. By the way, if you want to see how this works on, say, a friendly that's low on health,
My willpower is burning.
look at all that overhealth it gives them. So yeah, from what I understand, I believe Zarya actually got buffed in Stadium today. I don't know about how much, but yeah, I am tempted to try her out at some point. Okay, now let's talk about Rhine with his newest skin, the 8-bit Rhine skin, which looks amazing. So as you can see, I have a few builds I've come up with and kind of saved. Even though, gosh, they have really tried to butcher Rhine. Like, Rhine for a while just was the best tank in this mode, and then they just kept nerfing him. Ugh, and it just hurts. It felt like they were doing everything they could to try and make Rhine's experience in this mode worse. Especially after Freya was added, because then she just melts you all the time. It was infuriating. They've actually changed some things here today. For example, Infusion Generator was an item, and it wasn't even that much. It was like somewhere down here. Yeah, it was here, and Wilhelm Wagen was actually a power. And it didn't just increase your movement speed when your barrier is deployed, it also healed you for the damage it mitigated as a power. But it got swapped, because it looks like they're trying to encourage more barrier builds, because they apparently don't want Reinhardt to be a damage dealer, they want him to be a shield bot. And they should understand, Rhine players and Rhine teammates, I also learned this the hard way because some teammates got mad at me for staying back and just being a shield bot. They don't want you to just stand there and shield them. They want you to get in there and do damage, swing your hammer, go in there, fight. That's what your team wants you to do. But the developers don't seem to understand that. Rhine players don't want to just stand back in the back and be a shield bot. They want to be able to go in and, do the damage. They want to hit people with their fire strikes and make them blow up. They want to swing their hammer and clobber them. They want to be able to get in there and shatter them and be able to pull off that big hammer down that helps win the game. It's such a satisfying feeling, and the developers just don't seem to understand that. They think you're supposed to be the shield bot. But build variety, right? So, like, for a while, smashing and feeling the burn was really good together because it allowed you to just go in and just lifesteal and melee to your heart's content, and they couldn't really stop you because you were healing yourself and doing lots of damage at the same time. But they nerfed it to the point where it's just not a viable build anymore. At least I don't think it is. Like, you could combine that with some other stuff here, such as Plan Z, where you then also, if you lost health, you were also attacking faster. It was really good. Like, and then you combine that with some other things like Gloom Gauntlet, which also gave you movement speed and restored your health whenever you did melee damage. Just some other really good stuff here that you could combine it with, and they just have nerfed it a lot. They actually combined, in regards to the Fire Strike build, there used to be 2 separate items. One would increase your Fire Strike radius, one would increase the projectile speed, and also increase your ability power. Today they decided to just go ahead and combine those 2. You don't get any ability power from it, but you do get the radius and projectile speed, so that way you don't have to take up an extra item slot. You can, I guess the idea is that you take this, and then you can take other things to buff your ability power. Okay. So, basically, as you can see, so when it comes to the Fire Strike build, they've nerfed this in terms of its single target and AoE damage, I guess, where now it doesn't... It deals damage to other enemies in a 3-meter radius, not necessarily just the person that it hits. Or all of them. They did buff this, though, where it used to be you had to fire 2 Fire Strikes within 2 seconds of each other in order for a lava trail. And it just always felt awkward to have to do that, so they've made it where now it's just your second Fire Strike ever. Like, every second Fire Strike, you'll get that trail of lava. So that does make it more enticing. So this is kind of like what I've come up with in terms of a late game build. I know it's labeled early game. I just simply picked the ones you could probably end up by the late game, which is stuff to increase your ability power, and when you do ability power damage, you gain some other stuff as well, such as you gain more ultimate charge, you can restore your armor and shields. There's some other things that if you do ability power damage that you can, say, apply a healing reduction, Cyber Venom here, but that's if you're going to be playing it like either a healer or damage healer that does more ability power damage, in my opinion. Like, usually you want to go for some other stuff that is going to encourage, like, your survivability, at least when you're playing a character like Reinhardt. And this is a possible shield build that I kind of have come up with. I may have to try this out at some point, though I have a feeling I'm not going to generate that much cash, because you don't really generate cash as a tank by mitigating damage. You generate cash by doing damage. So you're not really going to be able to generate the cash you need to have a decent shield build in terms of items, because you're just going to be standing back shielding all the time. And that's just not fun and doesn't generate a huge lot of cash, so you're not going to be able to have a decent build. I have a possible hammer build that it used to be, but I have a feeling it's just nowhere near what it used to be, unfortunately. So, if you're curious, how do you... I guess I would just... You pull this up and then you just select from here. So if you're wanting to see what the Fire Strike looks like with this, that's what it looks like. And that's what it looks like with the Trail of Lava. And as you can see, more ability power means more damage from the Fire Strike. Which, of course, more ability power also means more damage for his ult. Now, if you're curious about the, reset build. If you're curious how big the shield can get when it comes to some of these other things here, because if you're wondering, well, this is basically how it would work. The barrier field's health is increased by 250% of your bonus maximum life. This one increases the barrier field size and health by 20%. So that's almost 4,000. Now, I believe there's a way, if you wanted, you could really also continue to buff this up if you want. Over 4,000 health shield. And you've got the amplification barrier here, and plus if they stand behind you, they're getting healed. But again, is this what you want to be doing the entire game? Just standing here with your shield up? No. I didn't think so. So Sigma, I've only tried once so far today. So far, what I liked is stuff that involves his barrier, as well as being able to fire a third hypersphere, and then having this, where, although it didn't seem to work properly, at least I didn't think so, where when you use an ability, you create 2 hyperspheres that will orbit around you, and they explode on contact, but they deal reduced damage. And then you can get things such as the barrier heals nearby allies. I had a game earlier where I actually out-healed my Zenyatta teammate. Now, this was a Zen who was choosing not to heal us, to the point where my teammates were asking our Zen if he was trolling, and I could see why his endorsement level was really low. At least I think it was. But he was one of those Zens that chooses not to heal his teammates. He just wants to be a damage dealer. And as someone who plays a lot of Zenyatta, I apologize on behalf of those Zenyatta players, because those are bad representations of good Zenyatta players. Good Zenyatas find ways to do both. You're not just a damage dealer, you are also a support. You are supposed to also heal your team. So if a Sigma is out healing a Zenyatta, you know there's a problem with the Zenyatta. But there's some really cool stuff you can do, such as if you're behind the barrier, you gain attack power and attack speed. If you're in front of it, you gain movement speed and lifesteal. There's some other really good stuff here, such as increasing the duration of your Connect Grasp to mitigate more damage. Increasing the explosion radius of your boulder. There's also some stuff here that you can get that can be really crazy, such as this one right here. The boulder projectile passes through the barrier and gains 300% projectile speed and more damage. So I saw Flats doing this on his stream, and he was basically sniping bots in the practice range with this thing. It was actually kind of nuts. I like the Hypersphere explosion radius and the range of the hyperspheres, so you can really poke from really far away with your hyperspheres as Sigma. Look at this. This is like just past 20 meters or so. This is a really far away range for your hyperspheres to be doing poke damage. But you can see the barrier that's spinning around. By the way, that barrier is also doing healing. You want to see? So we go over here to one of my allies. Look at this. My main barrier isn't out, but yet it's healing my ally.
Proclaiming a barrier.
Here's the other thing about this. The barrier is not only bigger and has more health, but it constantly regens. The downside is that it's slower to have it move out, to put it out. But if you're having a barrier here that's just constantly regenning and also healing your team, yeah. Look at that. Like, I'm a Sigma and I'm healing these guys.
Het universum buigt voor mij!
Sometimes the way that his flex works is a little awkward. I've never been the greatest Sigma.
Imperial force. Barrier initialized.
So I think if both barriers are around, also you can see these spheres that are circling around me because I've done abilities to have them like spin around me. Which, as you can see, if I then get close to them, they will explode on contact. So if they start meleeing you and you have those circling around you, all of a sudden you're doing extra damage. So far, I definitely like Sigma. This is probably the build I'm going to be using more often than not when I play Sigma. So those are the tanks in Stadium. I think I'm going to go ahead and cut this off. And I'm going to do separate videos on the tank. I just did on the tanks. On the DPS as well as the supports. So stay tuned when we talk about the DPS characters next. Stay tuned.